Assalamu alaikum and namaste to all the seasoned, enthusiastic, and budding business analysts who have joined us on a Saturday morning to build a strong foundation on APIs and take their BA careers to the next level. So we are thrilled to have all of you here who have joined us to explore a topic that lies at the crossroads of innovation, collaboration, and growth. So I'm pretty sure as a business analyst, this is an aha moment for all those who deal with software application integrations. So when one software application works seamlessly with another, that's just a wow moment for all of us. So how do we do this and what really goes behind this? So that's what we are going to explore today, and that's what our experts will be discussing in detail today. So keep your curious minds open for learning and questioning. My name is Fatima Suhair, and I work as a lead business analyst with 8+ years of experience in the edtech sector. So I also serve as the secretary for the IIBA Bengaluru chapter. So I will be your MC for the day, and I will be giving you some quick ground rules on how to go about today's session. So the ground rules for attending the session are pretty simple. So all that we want from you and expect from you is your active engagement during this webinar. So you can quickly grab a piece of paper and pen because our experts are going to give you some simple questions which you can answer during the course of the webinar. So feel free to ask any questions and make the most of this webinar. We have real experts from this field. So if you have any questions on API designing, this is the right platform to ask. And our aim for you is to walk away not only with an understanding of API designing fundamentals, but we also expect you to be able to do some kind of actionable knowledge in your professional lives as well. So we would like you to put into practice whatever you learned today. So at this point, I would, that's pretty much about the ground rules. You can use the live chat module and engage to the best extent you can. And also, we have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar where you can type in your questions in the chat window and we will take it forward from there. Now, I would like to invite our mentor Swami. That's what he prefers being called right now. All of us used to call him Swami sir, and we are also accustomed to calling him that way. But now he has asked us to call him mentor Swami. Okay, so he has been such a source of inspiration and guidance for all of us in driving the initiatives as part of IIBA India. So I now welcome him on stage to give us a short intro about what are the activities and goals of IIBA India, and then we will be moving forward with our discussion today. Over to you, Swami, sir.
Thank you so much, Fatima, excellent introduction, but I'll just tell you that my challenge was that am I audible? Am I visible?
Yes, you are.
Great, thank you.
Audible and
see, yeah, thank you, Fatima. Actually, the challenge I was facing was I was resourceful to most of the people, business analysis professional, and so I was called as Swami sir affectionately. Somehow inside my mind, my inner voice told me that, you are respected, but are they related to the current problems? That's where I thought that, I wanted to touch at least 1 million lives, 1 million working professional before my death. In that context, I thought that mentors for me is better because if I groom mentors like Fatima, Vikas of thousands of mentors, it is easy for me to reach. In that context only, I force everybody to don't call me Swami sir. And moreover, internationally also, the sir is not that great, this thing. It's an individual by name. That's the reason. Thank you very much for this. I'll take a couple of minutes only. See, IIBA is, basically IIBA Global, most of you know, International Institute of Business Analysis. They have one vision that, how do we shape the practice of business analysis? They shape in two ways. One, build a standard, BA standard through volunteers, and also put the certification, which is not easy to pass kind of certification. I mean, unless otherwise you don't have a study group, you don't have a proper conversation because you have to relate and answer. You can't read, recall, and remember. So that's what IIBA does it. But IIBA India is not taking that vision. And while they are doing it, together, how we achieve more as a team, how do we, every one of us, achieve more? That is a point in which that their mission is. inside that, what we built it, we created 3 imperatives. One is inclusive culture, and everyone is included, irrespective of their experience, everything, all are same for us. I used to get reverse mentoring from my own people because we mentoring each other. That's a way. Like Fatima might give you how to do Canva better, and I'll tell her how she can do her better. That's the way it goes. And that's what the inclusive culture. Then give attention to the quality. That's what we thought, that world class, because we intend to build world class professional. It means that it is not how much attention we give to the details of it. That's what we are. And while you're doing it, we made every Saturday as a IIBA India Learning Day or a Reflection Day. Today, this is a second seminar. One is study group. Just now I launched, myself and Jared launched, and I'm back here. So this is a way. Every Saturday, people should remember today is IIBA Day. I should not have any weekend conversation. This is what, and India it happens. Outside India, it will not happen. In India, it will happen. So because we are serious about learning and excelling ourselves, that's why the Chandrayaan 3 is the best example. We are humble. We don't become more visible, but we know, we are good at what we are doing, but we don't promote ourselves. That's a challenge which will come out over a period of time. And in this context, we have 5 chapters to achieve these 3 imperatives. One is a Delhi chapter, Bangalore chapter will talk about only career path and specialization. Today, this program is all about how do you improve your career path in the API area. I thank Krishna and of course, Sushant for this support, and they are part of my, I can say more than a speaker, they are volunteers, and they does it unconditionally with us because we were bothering last 2 weeks like that. And the second is that, we wanted to bring Chennai chapter only study group initiatives and mentoring initiatives. Delhi NCR talk, gamify your future. How do we do your career? And then government connects where we are now, we are good at. Delhi is a political capital of India. And then Hyderabad, we want to focus only artificial intelligence and new age skills. And then Mumbai, being a financial capital of India, financial future of business analysis and finance. This is the way 5 themes we have done. Though we have done 5 different themes, we are unified by our culture. It doesn't matter whom you are connecting with. We have almost 54 board members and 6 volunteers who are the past president or the thought leaders, and 60 people, anyone whom you reach, they speak one language. And then the second priority for us is building our quality, because only way we can differentiate ourselves is only quality. That is what IIBA did. And we have 4 different departments or functions or leaders, chapter leaders. Professional development, they identify reflected topics and themes. And then we do have something called marketing and communication, and they will do more. They make us visible and credible because to walk the talk. And then we do have community engagement team, which exclusively work with you people, engaging yourself, clearing your doubt, and bringing you whatever the way we wanted to help you. Then we do have an event management team, which will work only, whether it is a virtual or a physical or a hybrid event, the event management team make it efficiently and effectively. But with all that, what we wanted to do is we wanted to unify the ecosystem. In the sense, we have individuals like you, and we do have academia, corporate, as well as we also have we call it as EEPs, training provider. Everyone, we wanted to bring them in one platform, through 5 targeted programs. And how do we send weekly bites or once in 15 days? We will do it. That community engagement team will generally take it. And every month, this webinar, professional development webinar. Today, you are here because of that professional development webinar. Quarterly, we wanted to bring somewhere on a physical workshop or a virtual workshop. And then biannually, we wanted to conduct some sort of a CXO roundtables. And we wanted to bring the best of the best leaders in academia and corporate and all. And we want to unify everybody. And we wanted to get into a conversation so that we know what industry need and what academia can accomplish, and how a professional forum like IIBA can become a catalyst or a platform provider for this with the support of chapter leader. And then we will always support our global event annually. There are 2 events, very key events. We have an IIBA India, IIBA Global Event Series, in which we conduct annual conference. We also celebrate on November 1st is a global BA day. that is celebrated by global IIBA Global. We all participate and we give our best at it. And to tell you that, just 2 days back, I'm back from a staff meeting, and to tell you that India is just edging towards our volunteering. In the sense, across world, we are in third. First is Canada, second is North America, and third is India. And please join our community, and please join as a volunteer for our team. Become a board leader. Together, we reach 1 million working professional. Help them to achieve whatever they want to achieve. Thank you for this few minutes. Thank you. Over to you, Fatima. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing those the aspirations of the IIBA India as a whole. And let's all strive to become better volunteers and contribute to the community in a better way. So without further ado, let me dive into today's exciting session on fundamentals of API designing for BA professionals. In today's technology-driven landscape, APIs play a pivotal role in facilitating seamless data exchange and innovation across different systems. So understanding APIs allow business analysts to effectively bridge the gap between technical and business requirements. So it also enables us to communicate more efficiently with the development teams. It helps us design more effective solutions and also drive better decision-making based on data insights. I now invite two stalwarts in the travel and tourism industry who are transforming our lives in a really big way. We have Sushant Mathur, Director of Product Management, Sabre India. Sushant is a technologist, lean product development enthusiast, aspiring author, and an avid reader with 17 plus years of experience developing and launching technology products, primarily for the B2B companies. So as a director of product management for Sabre, Sushant has been managing lodging, ground transportation, and sea product portfolio. Sushant is passionate about using technology to solve complicated customer problems. Welcome, Sushant. Now, I welcome Krishna Kumar, Principal Product Manager, Sabre. Krishna also comes with 13 plus years of product manager and BA experience in the travel domain, both in terms of airlines and hotels. So he is also a data enthusiast and a passionate Toastmaster who has a master's in business administration and is currently pursuing his MTech in data science. So welcome once again to both of you. Let's now embark on this enlightening journey into the fundamentals of API designing for business analysts. I now hand over the virtual stage to Sushant to kickstart this exceptional learning experience. Sushant, over to you.
Thanks, Fatima. I hope everybody can hear me fine.
Yes, you are audible.
Yes. All right. So good morning, everyone. And thanks, Swami and Fatima for great introduction. So today, as Fatima just mentioned, all of us, we are technologists. All of us are working with technology in some or other way. So irrespective of what your title is, whether you are business analyst, product manager, project manager, or maybe business analyst enthusiast, this session is for all of you to understand something which is very, very important in today's world. We are going to talk about APIs. And in today's session, we understand some of you will probably not be that familiar with APIs and nitty-gritty of APIs. So what we are going to do is, in the first half of today's session, we will spend some time on the basics. Once basics, all of us, we have the context and all of us are on the same page, then we'll work on a real-life industry use case so that each one of us can get that hands-on experience around how to design APIs. After that, we'll have some homework for you as well so that you can apply all the learnings from today's session to understand how things work behind the scene. But before we start, what exactly are we going to talk about? In mid-90s, Mark Anderson, he mentioned that software is eating the world. And if we have to take the same context and mention it now, we can definitely say APIs are eating the world. APIs are everywhere. We have been using APIs for a while. And in fact, at this point of time, we are using some APIs. Let's take some real life examples. How many of you use Instagram? I'm sure maybe some of you will use, some of you will not use, but Just as a matter of fact, more than 20% of Instagram's overall population is in India. So we have a lot of Indians who are using Instagram. Now, what happens when you see an interesting cat meme on Instagram? You want to like it. So you see this icon there, you click on it, and basically what you are saying is, you are saying, hey, Instagram, can you like this picture of John? And what happens once you click on it, if all goes well, that icon is clicked, and Instagram is technically saying, hey, Sushant, I have saved your like. Similarly, let's say you want to see all pictures of your friend John Doe. What you do is you just say, hey, Instagram, show me all picture of my friend's profile. And answer is, hey, here you go. See all the pictures of your friend. Now, what happened behind the scene is multiple API requests, multiple API responses, who does the job of showing you what exactly you want to. Let's take one more example. All of us like shopping online, especially when you have to look for something that you want badly. You go to different websites and then you search for the product that you are looking for. So these online stores, they use APIs to show you search results, exactly like asking a store assistant for a specific product. So when you search for products on an online store, it's exactly like how you would find an item for yourself in a real life store. Now these APIs are doing the searching behind the scene. Let's take another example, a little more complex. All of us, we book our flights online. Now what happens is when you want to book your flights, you get a lot of options. Options to provide city, departure date, arrival date, cabin class, so on and so forth. So you have multiple options or parameters which you can provide to get the required results. Now, when you select all these variables, you see list of all flight options along with the cost. Now, what's happening is you are using this website to access data which is hosted by airline. Or if I have to be more technical, this data is stored in airline's inventory management system that you are able to retrieve and that you are able to see with the power of these APIs. So now in this case, the travel service acts as the API of that airline to give you all the required results. Now, we talked about theory too much, right? So let's just see it in action, how it currently works. So we'll take the same example of online travel booking. Imagine you are in a restaurant, you order food, and food comes from the kitchen. So kitchen is the system. Now your table is the place where the response, which means food, will be delivered. Now to deliver food on the table, there must be a channel of communication between the table and the kitchen. Now this waiter that you see in the center is messenger between the table and the kitchen. It takes requests from you and tells the kitchen, which is a system, what has to be cooked or prepared. And then waiter delivers the response to the user, which is obviously your favorite food, which you have ordered. So now purpose served by the waiter in the restaurant is exactly the same as that of that online travel service. Both of them are APIs. Okay, so I hope all of you now get the context. Now let's just see it in a little more technicality, how it currently works. We'll take the same Instagram example. Okay, so when you want to like a picture, basically you are just sending a request. So request is initiated from your mobile app, which is the client. Request goes to the server, and then if all goes well, you will receive the successful response. Now see how exactly it works. So now we'll see when you send your request, it goes something like this, where you are calling a specific endpoint with some additional parameters. And don't worry, we'll cover all these topics in detail. But let's just look at the request. So request is nothing but an API call with some required attributes and parameters. It goes to the API server, it processes it, and it gives you a collection of the pictures that you are looking for. So that's the response. So this is how API request and response work behind the scene. Now, before we talk about how to think about APIs, how to design APIs, let's just see and cover some of the basic details of APIs. We will talk about APIs and interface. So before we start talking about some of these key terms, we'll talk about what exactly do we mean when we say APIs? What exactly interface is. We'll talk about some key components of APIs, because all of us, all business analysts and everybody who is part of today's session, if you want to understand APIs, you have to design them. And you cannot design them if you don't understand the nitty-gritty of APIs, which means basic components of API system. We'll talk about it. Then we'll also cover some key terms. Synchronous versus asynchronous call. What do we mean by that? Authentication versus authorization. Different methods and parameters which you should know before you start designing your set of APIs. And last but not the least, we'll also talk about some common buzzwords that all of us hear whenever someone mentions APIs. REST, SOAP, GraphQL, so on and so forth. So we'll try to cover all the basics so that all of you have the right context of how APIs work. And then obviously Krishna, my colleague, will cover the nitty-gritty of API designing, starting from what you should do first and then all the subsequent steps. So first, let's just take a step back and just think, when we talk about API, what is the full form of API? Application Programming Interface. We'll spend next few seconds just to understand these terms first. Let's first talk about interface. So when we talk about application programming interface, what exactly do we mean when we say interface? So if you look at the standard definition of interface, an interface is a point where two systems, subject, organization, etc., meet and interact. In this case, if you see, the power socket is an interface. So think of APIs as interface through which two different devices, systems, upstream, downstream, talk to each other to send and receive information. So for example, if you have weather API in your phone, weather app, you are using your smartphone to get weather information from a computer or system which is probably hundreds of miles away. But it will give you the required information because you have the right interface in place. Similarly, if you see the faucet, again, these are real life examples. The faucet is an interface. But to use that interface, you should know how to use the tap, how to use the right operation to receive the water which will come out of the faucet. But in this case, the faucet acts as an interface. Now we'll take very common and very generic example. Door. Now, door is an interface. We interact with the door to, let's say, enter the house. Now, as you know, by looking at all these examples, interfaces are everywhere. And now you also understand interfaces allow you to interact with different systems and get the required information that you need. So that's the second part of API, interface. Now let's just talk about application programming. So same power socket example. Now, what occurs behind the scene when we put the device into an outlet and turn it on? The way current works in the power system. So when you plug the device into the power socket, you receive electricity is nothing but, you can assume, is kind of application programming. So now you can summarize that API is an interface to interact with an application which has some programming done to give you the required output. Okay, now how the requests are being made, how they are made, how data is exchanged, it all depends on several other components. We'll talk about each one of them one by one. Let's just look at different components of APIs. So all of us understand the basic definition of what API is. Now let's talk about different components. So this diagram that you see on the screen, hopefully it's okay for everyone now, talks about different components, and it's a simple client-based architecture that we are talking about. So let's assume first, to initiate a request, there should be a client, which you see on the left-hand side of this screen. So client is someone who will initiate API request through different user actions or events. And client is also responsible for assembling and directing requests to the API server. So let's say your browser is a client. You perform different operations. Your client is responsible for initiating all the required API requests. And then client is also responsible for giving you the required information by collecting all this data from different endpoints. Now, once your client initiates the request that you see on the screen, request will obviously have different components. For example, endpoint. Endpoint is nothing but a dedicated URL for a specific resource or specific ask. Then you have different methods: get, post, put, delete. We'll talk about each one of them, so don't worry if these terms are new for you. Then you have different parameters. Parameters are if you want to pass specific instructions as a client as part of your request. And then obviously your request header, request body, which is data which you need to create, update, or deleting a resource. So that's how request is formed. Now, once request is formed, it goes to API server. Now, your API server is responsible for a lot of things: handling authentication, validating input data, performing all the manipulation and retrieval of information to give you what you are looking for. So your API server technically does everything to give you what you ask in your request. And how it provides you what you are looking for? It provides you as part of the response. So once you get the response, your response has, again, a lot of things. For example, status code. If all goes well, 200 status, 201, 404, so on and so forth, right? So there are different statuses which is written as part of your API response. Then you also have response headers and body. We talked about how different components currently work in a simple client-based architecture where you have client, request, API server, which does the processing. It gives you the response back. I hope all of you are clear so far. And if you have any questions, feel free to put it on the chat window. We'll cover it as we are presenting. Now, some of the key terms that you should know as someone who is designing APIs. One is synchronous versus asynchronous call. So we just talked about request, response. Now, to understand what synchronous and asynchronous call means, let's take some interesting example. So imagine you have a friend, or maybe let's say your cousin, who loves playing games with you, but both of you live in different apartments. And assume you have walkie-talkie to talk to each other, and you can talk and you can plan when to meet and when to play. So if you have to make a synchronous call, what exactly you are going to do is you'll just press the button on your walkie-talkie and you just say, hey, do you want to play? And then you wait until your friend says or cousin says, yes, I'm ready, before you start playing. So in this case, you are pausing everything and waiting for your cousin's answer before continuing, because you need to be on the same page before you decide what to play or when to meet. Now, in asynchronous call, it's all about kind of leaving a WhatsApp message. You just leave a message and you just say that, hey, do you want to play? And then you don't have to stop everything and wait for an immediate response. You can go on with your activities, and after a few minutes, you can just see if there is a response from your cousin, which says, yeah, I'm ready, let's just start playing. So synchronous call and asynchronous call, if I have to explain in more technical way. So in synchronous call, when one system sends request to another system, it waits for the response before it goes to the next steps or with other subsequent tasks. Whereas in asynchronous call, when a system sends request, it doesn't wait for an immediate response. It carries on with its own operations. And when data is ready, is delivered to the required system. So if you think it from more technical ways, synchronous calls block the calling thread until the response is received, while asynchronous calls don't even block anything. They allow it to proceed with other tasks until the response is ready. Now, why it is so important when we talk about synchronous versus asynchronous? Because you have to be very clear on this concept of, when I'm sending a request, do I need to wait for the response to be delivered before I plan for the subsequent steps or not? So I hope all of you are clear on synchronous versus asynchronous calls. Now let's go to the next topic, which is also quite important. So now you understand client, you have sent the request, you know whether it's asynchronous or synchronous. The next step is authentication and authorization. Authentication, as the name says, if you have your APIs and if you want other systems to use it, they should have the right credentials. Otherwise, they won't be able to get access to the APIs. So that's what authentication is all about. But having the access or having the right credentials to access APIs doesn't mean they'll have authorization to perform each and every operations that your APIs currently support. I'll give you a very real life example. When we look at Swiggy, okay, there are different types of user personas in same Swiggy app. Customers like us who are ordering food. Then you have restaurants who receive the order, they work on your order. And then you have delivery person who take your order and deliver it to your home. Now, based on different personas, you have to give them the right authority. This is what authorization is all about. So first you need to decide who should be able to access your APIs. And once they have access, what operations they are entitled to or they are allowed to perform. Okay, so you have to be very clear on these concepts of authentication and authorization. Okay, I hope it's clear now. Now let's talk about something which I mentioned in the beginning, that when you send API requests, there are different actions that as a client you can perform to interact with your API server. Now these different methods, take them as verbs that define the type of action that you want to be performed. There are different types of HTTP methods. Get, so as the name says, get means I want to get something. Post, I want to post something to create a new resource. Put is updating an existing resource, and delete is obviously, as the name says, deleting it. Let's take one very interesting example. Let's say you have a friendly robot. This robot has the ability to click pictures and store pictures so that you can see them in future. Now, when we talk about get, this is like you are asking your friend robot to show you a drawing which you drew, let's say 6 months ago. So when you're using get method, you are saying, hey, give me what you already have. Okay, so you are retrieving a picture which you drew, let's say 6 months ago, and it's already there, and you just want to retrieve it. Now imagine you want your robot friend to save a picture which you just drew, maybe let's say 30 minutes ago. That's all about posting. So you are posting this new picture that you have just drew, and you want your friendly robot to save it, store it, so that you can see it again in future. Put is, let's say you already have a drawing which you drew and which is already there. Now you want this drawing to update it. So let's say you drew a scenery, a famous scenery that we always draw, and you forgot to maybe, let's say, draw a sun. Now you can do it. And you are saying, hey, put this means update what you already have with this new resource data that I'm providing to you. And delete is, as the name says, deleting is something which you have and you want it to be deleted because you don't need it anymore. Okay, so I hope all of you are now clear on different HTTP methods. Now, let's talk about parameters. Again, something which I mentioned in the beginning, that there are several things which you should know, and parameters are also something which play a very important role in this context of APIs. What are parameters? Now, if you see this picture, it looks a little odd, but I'll give you how and why it is so relevant to this topic of API parameters. Imagine you go to Subway. What is the most difficult challenge each one of us face when you are standing at that Subway counter? They ask you to provide different ingredients which you want in your Subway sandwich. Now, to make that magical sandwich that you need, you have to customize it by saying, hey, I need this, and I probably don't need this. So when you are submitting the request for these special ingredients, they are nothing but parameters. So these parameters like cheese, lettuce, tomatoes, etc., are something that you are specifically specifying to make something which is unique to that specific requirement at that point of time. So we see one example as well. So if you see in this context of APIs, parameters are extra pieces of information that you can include in your API request. So Krishna, if you just click it once. Now, if you see this, you are trying to fetch, let's say, weather information from a weather service provider. What is highlighted in blue is the basic endpoint URL. But now let's say you want to see weather for a specific city, let's say New York. So now what you see in yellow is parameter where you are clearly saying, I want to set city parameter to New York because I want to see weather data just for New York. Now, what if you want to make it more specific to your needs? Now you are saying for New York, when you return me weather information, I want to see temperature in Celsius and so on and so forth. So you can pass different parameters as long as they are supported by that API server. These parameters will guide the APIs on what you are looking for and how you want your response to be formatted. Okay, so in more technical terms, parameters are part of the URL query string for GET request or part of the request body for post, put, delete. Okay, so I hope all of you are now clear on what exactly parameters are and why do we need them. Now, remember I also talked about a couple of buzzwords that as you are looking at different set of APIs and different set of designing tool, there are also a couple of buzzwords that all of us hear a lot, right? For example, SOAP, REST, GraphQL. Now let's just quickly look at them. Again, a picture which is completely different than the topic, but again, this is something which is relevant because we want to give you real life examples. So imagine you want to ask questions and get answers from your friends who live in different houses in your locality. You have a couple of options that you can do. So one is you can send them letters. So when you send them letter, it's all about REST, sending letters to your friend. You write down your questions, put it in an envelope, and your friend, once they receive it, they read the question and write an answer back to you. Simple, easy, but obviously the challenge is sometimes you get a big envelope with a lot of unnecessary paper. That's what REST is in a very generic understanding. SOAP is like you have a special number, let's say a WhatsApp group, to call your friends. You can ask your question and they'll give you an answer. But obviously, to create a WhatsApp group, you have a lot of additional rules that you need to follow. So it can be a bit complicated. You should have numbers of each one of your friends in your address book. You need to create a group. But good thing is, it can do a lot of different things, even if you need only a simple answer. Now, GraphQL is about, let's say you have one of your friends who can be there to help you. So instead of writing letters or using a phone or creating a WhatsApp group, you can just ask your friend, helper, and tell him exactly what you want. He'll go around and collect the answers from your friend and bring them back to you. So REST is like sending letters, SOAP is like using special phone, and GraphQL is like having this helpful friend who can collect these answers on your behalf. Now let's talk about in technical ways. So REST is an architectural style for designing applications where obviously you can perform operations like get, post, put, and delete with different HTTP methods. But if you want information about that specific requirement that you have, sometimes it can lead to overfetching, means getting more data than needed, or maybe underfetching, maybe getting less data than you actually need in some cases. Whereas SOAP, which means full form is Simple Object Access Protocol, is a protocol for exchanging information. In the implementation of web services in this context, it defines set of rules for how messages should be formatted and sent over, let's say, various protocols that you have. Okay. Oh, often XML, right? When we talk about SOAP, often we are talking about XML. So SOAP messages can be very complex. There will be lot of metadata that you have, which is in a way sometimes is good, but the challenge is it's very heavy in terms of processing. Whereas GraphQL, which is probably the newest cousin, when we talk about SOAP and REST, GraphQL is more of a query language. So instead of the server defining what data is sent to the client, like how in REST, GraphQL allows client to request exactly the data that it needs. So client can send queries to GraphQL server, specifying the structure of data they want in whatever way they want. So it helps you because there is no overfetching and there is no underfetching. So this is what we mean when we say SOAP, REST, GraphQL. each one of them, they have different pros and different cons. So we are not advocating one over other, but these are the concepts that you should know based on the kind of product and context and domain you are in. So I hope all of you are now clear on all these basic concepts. Now, how to remember and memorize these concepts? By applying them in real. So now I would like to invite Krishna to talk about one very common and interesting use case where we'll follow all these terms that we just talked and also try to work together. So as we mentioned in the beginning, before Krishna start, we want all of you to take pen, paper, notepad, any tool, because we want you to work on this exercise along with us. Okay, so over to you, Krishna.
Thank you, Sushant. Hello all. I'm very excited to be presenting this use case today. Now, let me start with a question. How many of you use Netflix today? That's fine. Don't answer it. I know. If not many, if not all, in fact, many of us will be using it. Now, the most important question is, how many used to use Netflix by sharing your passwords with friends and families? We no longer can do that, right? We got affected by recent crackdown by Netflix on password sharing. Now, when we were thinking about use case of what we can have for today's session, this aspect of Netflix no more sharing passwords came into the picture. And we are going to see the underlying transactions that could have been implemented to get this work done. Now, I'm not going to say that this is how they have implemented. I'm not going to say that how they are able to see whether you are able to share the password and how the detecting mechanism is happening in the background. That's not the context here. It is just an imaginary use case on a real life scenario, but imaginary with respect to how they would have implemented it with respect to the interactions. Now, when the aspect of designing an API comes into the picture, first, we'll have to be very clear what is the goal that which we are going to have. Then we'll have to understand who are the players involved. When I say players, it could be real human people or people who are in a situation. It could even be a robotic aspect, which is doing some trigger as a call to action, such that something happens in the background, right? Those are all the players involved. For example, in a Swiggy scenario, there are 3 players with 3 different profiles. One is a actual user of the Swiggy, another is a restaurant owner, then another one is the delivery person, right? There are 3 different players here. Likewise, could be different modules. These modules are nothing but the interfaces which happens in the background where the interactions happen, right? So we have to be clear about the goal. We have to be clear about the players. We have to be clear about the modules. When we are clear about all these 3 things, then we will be able to set up the interactions. Now, first, let me take you through the goal, players, and modules. And then if you understand that, then you will be able to start jotting down the interactions by yourself using a pen and paper or even a notepad or anything. Okay, so let me take you through the goal. The goal is, of course, stop password sharing. It's very simple. You, as a subscriber to Netflix, should not be able to share your account details to somebody else who are not in your household. So Netflix, if you go and look into their place where they have said how they are going to stop password sharing, is that Netflix announcement that which happened speaks like this. Netflix statement, only members living within the same household will be allowed to access an account. That's as simple as it is. The household is a key. So how are they able to identify the household is what is the key here. So hope you are clear with respect to what the goal is. Let's look into the players involved. Here, there are no different players except for the subscriber. And the subscriber is the person who is going to trigger any call to action for the password detecting to happen. Now, the subscriber has different characteristics. It could be his profile. So I, as a subscriber, I have 3 different profiles. And it could be your devices that which you use to log in. Say it's your laptop or it's your TV, it's your mobile app or your tab, right? And it could be the different IP addresses associated with these machines or the internet provider's IP address. And there are other details that which goes into the subscriber's characteristics. So we establish what is the goal. We establish what is the player involved. Now let us look into the modules involved. Now, again, these modules are the crux of what we are going to have as interactions today. So if you have any questions, please put your questions there and Sushant and me will be able to help you with it. Now, that should be a firewall. Somebody asked about how authentication is done, how authorization is done, right? Kamalika, I believe. Now, authorization basically is done in an intermediary layer between the actual server and the user. Now, this ensures that there is protection to the server from malicious access from different users. There are a lot of people in the world today who wants to sabotage the app. Now, firewall ensures that the authentication or the filtering is done in such a way that only valid users are sent to the server to have the requested actions to be performed upon. So here there is a module called firewall. Then, of course, there is an app. The app is the place where the actual interaction and the response happens. And the app is basically accessed by the player who is the subscriber here, right? Then you have a module inside the platform called profiles. Now, what does this profile do? Basically, profile ensures that it lists all the payment methods or the history which you have used. It gives you access that this person has access to these set of videos and not for these set of videos. It has the details about the different IP addresses you have logged in, different device types you have logged in. And it will also have the different aspects of which movies you have seen in the past, what is the duration in which you have used, and likewise, right? Then obviously you have a magic box. Again, I want to stress this, that this is a black box. This module, we are not going to have define how the algorithm internally works to define the password detection. Let's keep it simple. It's a black box for us. It's a module exists there. Its main purpose is to get a request to say, is there a password detection? And it does some magic inside, and the response is there is no password detection or there is password sharing detection happening. So it's as simple as it is. Now with that, let's look into the interactions. So we have established who is the player. So who will be the player? Obviously the subscriber. The goal is to ensure that there is no password detection done. And there are 4 different modules. One is the app itself, then the firewall, then it happens to be the next to be the profiles, and then you will have the magic box. Now, can you quickly jolt down how the interaction flow happens? We can speak about it in next, but if you can also parallelly do it, that would be great. Obviously, the first step, as described by Sushant, is to ensure that you secure your app by the form of authentication. So how and when authentication happens? Authentication happens when user opens a Netflix app in mobile and enters the user ID password. Now, you cannot perform any action in your app unless and until you have a valid user ID and password, and that gets authenticated. I mean, who authenticates it? The firewall. So who gets the request? It's the firewall. So this is an interaction between 2 modules, which is the app and the firewall, by means of the user, that is the subscriber, the player, who enters the user ID and passwords and sends a request to the firewall. So now you know that there are 2 modules. There is an interaction in between. So obviously there's an interface, that is the API. And that API is a method of get. Here we are just going to get a valid session ID, which then becomes the token to be able to access this application for a certain duration of time. So Anil asked about what is token, and this becomes the token where the session ID becomes the token for the user to continue using this application. And the first step for that is authentication. And the API, let's call it get user authentication request, and the response would be get user authentication response. The method is get, and the general parameters of this is user ID, the password, which is obviously will be encrypted, IP number, which is the internet provider's number from which the app is being used, device type. Now we simplified it that it is only mobile type. The timestamp and transaction ID is something which is important that I have added here, but I'll explain about timestamp and transaction ID at a later stage. I'm not saying these are the only parameters request will go inside, but this could be others. There was also another question, interesting question about what is the difference between a query parameter and a method parameter, right? The query parameter is basically, in this case, the query is about, it's not a query, I would say, but it is just an aspect. Okay, let's go to the weather app example provided by Sushant. The queries were which city and, for in what Celsius or Fahrenheit we required the data from. Those becomes the query, but the method parameter is the get, the API itself, right? It was the get weather API. So that becomes the method parameter. And the endpoint remains the same for all of this, but just the method parameter varies. And for each of these method parameters, there would be different query parameters if required. Hope that answers your question, Anil. I guess it was, I don't know, it was Anil or somebody else. Now let's look into the second part. I hope you all got the authentication scenario where there is two modules involved, which is the app and the firewall. The interaction happens like this, and these are the parameters. Now, what would be the next step? Obviously, authentication is done. Then it should be the authorization, right? Hope you are writing them as I speak, or you are already drawn this. If so, that's great. Now, what happens in authorization? Now, when there is an authentication which is successful, then the list of movies are listed in your app, right? Now, Netflix wants you to have a gauge of all these movies that which is available for you to use it. Now, when you click on a particular movie, then is where your request gets authorized in the app. Why? Because you should have access to this app, or you should have access to this movie to play it in your app. Even though you have a valid user ID password, if you have not paid for it, then there is no authorization for you to access this movie. So that becomes the second step. The call to action would be to, when clicks on a movie by a user, that's the player, the subscriber, gets a request, now not to the firewall, but to the profiles module. Why not to the firewall? Even though the firewall is in the picture still, it has already authenticated you to have a valid session ID or a token to be able to proceed on to the next set of work that which you have to do in the app. So that becomes the authorization. Over here, there are two modules, obviously the app and the profile. So obviously there is an interaction, that's the API, get user authorization request. And the response from the module would be the get user authorization response. Again, the method is get here. The parameters within this request could be session ID, valid session ID, that which you have already been authenticated with, the profile ID, the IP number, device type, and you have selected a movie. So obviously there is a movie ID and there is a timestamp and transaction ID, which we'll speak about later. Hope this is clear. Now, the next step is the actual aspect of our goal. Somebody has to see whether this password, user ID password, and the session that which we have created is basically not sharing this password with some other user who is there in the system, right? That's the multiple user deduction work that which happens now. So it happens not as a user interaction. Here, the player is not triggering the request. Here, ideally, the profiles should send the request onto the magic box to be able to say, if on successful authorization, provided that the person has paid for that movie, can the profile send a request to the magic box saying, is there multiple user? Yes, it can. So that's what is happening here. The profile send a request, the magic box receives the request and does its magic to be able to say whether there is multiple user deduction or not. So the API for this is again is a get multiple access deduction request, and the response method is get here. the parameters over here have increased: a valid session ID, a profile ID, user ID, IP number, device type. Is there any other active IPs available in the system? So that's profile will have this data assumably. And previous used IPs. What are all the different other movie IDs which are active now? What is the requested movie ID? And again, the aspect of timestamp and transaction ID. Now, I'm not saying this is how it is getting implemented today. This could be one of the way in which it gets implemented. There could be other parameters, but this is what will be the typical flow in which this whole transaction happens. Now, we saw these individual transactions at each levels, right? But in a day-to-day activity, if you have taken your pen and paper and put this, if you do not know the technique in which you can do this, basically you will be struggling to understand the interaction. And in real world scenario or an industry standard, we use to document this process into a simplified way or a visualized way is what we call as the web sequence diagram. And here is an example of a web sequence diagram for our goal today. You can see there are different modules, which is app, firewall, profile, magic component, video streamer as a different verticals, right? These are the different verticals here. And each of these verticals will have an interaction happening. Now, the interaction on the top will be the first interaction which happens. Then the second interaction would be the second one which happens. And in between, this would be the sub interactions which happens likewise, right? So this becomes the user flow in a step-by-step process between different modules. And the initiation or the player will be somewhere sitting over here initiating this action. Okay. What is the initiation of action in our example here? Somebody tries to open the app and types in the user ID password. And that becomes the call to action where this request is generated and sent to the firewall from the app. So this direction of the arrow shows the flow of message from the initiator to the receiver. Again, the response is saying it's valid user ID password, no problem. Please go ahead with the next set of action. Okay. If it is not a valid scenario, then an error response happens and you have to retype the user ID password. Then next is the get user authentication authorization request. It goes to the profile from the app to say whether they are able to stream this video or not. Internally, profiles then sends a request to magic component to say, hey, is there multiple access detection? Magic component does it magic and responds back saying, if there is a deduction of multiple user or not. Let's say if there is no multiple user deduction happens, right? So you can say this is there is a box in which it says there is an alternate method possible. One method is that there is no user detected or multiple user detected. Then the authorization response goes back to the app and it clearly says it's a positive response. And the app will say, I need to stream this video. And it goes to the video streamer app, for example. So this method is a post method because here it's not getting any authentication or authorization or getting anything back, but it is accessing something which is already available in the video streamer, a stored information, right? So that becomes a post method, post video streamer request. And the post method response, the app do not have to wait for this to happen, right? The video player has to wait for it, but the app as such has just initiated the request, which means that this becomes an asynchronous call, right? That's why it is denoted in a dotted line here. And the video streamer gets back this data in packages or in packets to the app and it starts playing. The package, whatever is happening in the backend keeps happening, even if you pause the video, even if you do anything with the app. So that's separate process. So that's why it becomes an asynchronous call. So there was a question about synchronous and asynchronous. Hope this example helps you with it. Now, this is all happens when it is a positive action where there is no multiple user detected. But if it is a multiple user is getting detected, then the response comes back saying there is an error message. Okay. Please post your questions if you have anything, but let's go to the next in interest of time. Let's look into the non-functional aspects. Remember, I spoke about the timestamp and these transaction ID. Why is it required? Basically, if somebody says, hey, your app is not responding in the way it should, I've paid for it, but the movie is not streaming, right? Now somebody has, in the Netflix account, somebody has to be there to support this. So how will they know which transaction is the user speaking about? The user will not say this API, this problem is happening there, right? The user will just say, I clicked on this video, it's not playing. But the person who has to understand these transactions to know where the issue is, he has to track this API. So that's where the logging and tracking comes into the picture. And to allow the APIs to be designed properly, you should have a definite logging mechanism and a tracking mechanism. And for that, the timestamp and session ID with the transaction ID will come into use, right? Now, if we don't do this properly at the beginning or to analyze certain aspects, like, for example, how many transactions your system will support, like transactions per second, TPS, it means, right? Then what should be a response time? For example, will your subscriber be okay to wait for 10 minutes to play this video when he clicks on the video link? He clicks on the video link, same, it will play in 10 minutes. Will he be okay? Obviously, no. The response time in which the request is processed should also be defined even before you do the designing of the APIs. You have to ensure that errors and warnings are clearly identified, right? For example, you say when the user clicks on a video to be streamed, you get Java null pointer exception. What will the user do? Rather, user should be given an error and a warning which clearly identifies the real reason why this happened in a functional way. For example, the video cannot be played because you don't have the corresponding authorization, right? You have not paid for it, something like that. So that has to be defined properly. Now, your system cannot function as if it has the entire infrastructure in the world, right? There is memory behind, there is processing time, there is everything behind it. In a cloud world today, you can just keep having infinite number of resources, but a resource means money, and you cannot just spend so much money on it. If you use IRCTC in the previous past, you would have understood IRCTC, whenever there is a surge of logins, it just server is down, right? That is also not a good experience for our users. So there are two things out here. One, you have to define the limit in which you can support the incoming request, number of requests. Say you can support maximum of 1,000 transactions per second at the peak, right? But you should also define what should happen after 1,000 transactions per second. User system should throttle, and how seamlessly you can throttle without affecting the behavior of the user or the experience of the user. So all these are very important to be able to get the gauge of it. Now let's look into let's look into a common tools that which I use on a day-to-day access. Now, to design this APIs in the sense like how the request will look, how the response will look, I can even go into Notepad++, a simple tool which has JSON support, XML support, where you can format this XML or JSON request and responses. It's very simple and very easy to use. You don't have to pay money for it, and you can just use it without, it's an open source and it's very amazing. But if you want help with respect to how this schema should look like, it is somewhat not the perfect tool to use. You can use something like an XML spy, where you have to design the schemas. You have to design how the API look and faces look, but you don't know to code it, but you will be able to design it in an intuitive way using boxes and data input and other stuff. So XML spy is another interesting tool for XML based structures. Then the next is you want to even test the APIs by sending a request and response with get method, post method, and other stuff. Postman is an amazing tool. You can even write the response. If it is 200, then look into this particular value and how it should behave with the response. You can even have a a response structure shown in a web page kind of a scenario. Okay. Like some Postman, if you want to understand more on APIs, Postman tool is the place to start for you to do not just designing, but also testing those APIs. Documentation for open APIs, Swagger is an amazing tool. What happens is when you document your APIs in the Swagger, when somebody wants to code to your APIs, it becomes that much more easy in an open API standard where people will be able to create the objects just from the Swagger tool. Now, all these are very high level. This is just a common tools which we use internally. You can please look into it. I don't know, Fatima and Sushant, if we have time for a practice session on a Swiggy app. If people want
5 minutes, I feel.
Okay. Sushant?
I think we can take about 5 minutes so that the others get a hands-on feel of how it is. At least one or two can share their the understanding as well.
Sure. Thanks, Krishna, and thanks, Fatima. So I hope all of you are obviously hungry for knowledge, but it's also Saturday morning, so we understand you must be feeling hungry, and just like a lot of Swiggy users, you are also going to probably order something to eat. Now, let's take the same example of Swiggy or any food order delivery app. Assume you have to design a new API which will allow your users to search for a specific food which they can enter and provide. And based on the query that they have entered, you need to provide a response which will have list of all restaurants that can serve the food, and obviously within that radius, maybe let's say 10 miles, 15 miles, so on and so forth. So now what we want all of you to do is just spend next 5 minutes to just think about, number one, how your APIs will look, what request parameters will you specify, because I see there are a lot of questions with respect to HTTP methods and request parameters. So just think in your API, doesn't matter what your endpoint URL is, what parameters will you pass and what will be part of your response body. So just think it from mainly that high level designing point of view, what will you pass in your request and how your response will return the required results for that specific customer. So 5 minutes, we want all of you to use a simple copy, pen, paper, and then after 5 minutes, we want some of you to definitely volunteer and just say that, hey, this is what I envision this API to work. So it's 11:44 now. Maybe let's use time until 11:48, and then some of you can volunteer and start sharing your response.
Yeah, sounds great, Sushant. Let's see how it goes.
Hey, I see Anil has raised his hand and Kamalika has also shared her answer. Can we unmute them, Fatima, so that they can just quickly share their answers with
Yes,
everyone?
I can. Can we do it at after 11:48 so that others finish?
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
so
Maybe
I'll plan it.
we can even keep the discussion flowing. So Kamalika and Anil, they can start with their
Right.
response
Let
and others
them
can add
keep
to it.
chatting and yeah. Second. Yeah, I will allow Kamalika to talk.
Hey, hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can hear you, Kamalika.
Yeah, so my idea is like when we have opened the Swiggy app and we are kind of ordering for a restaurant. So I am assuming I'm already authenticated. So I already have my user credentials authenticated at the very first level when I'm accessing my Swiggy app. So that's the first level of request that has happened. And now in my Swiggy app, I am actually going into maybe food as an option. And there I obviously the inputs for which when I select a food item, maybe I'm looking for some Chinese food, maybe chow mein, maybe. So I give in a request, maybe vegetarian chow mein, and then there are a list of restaurants which come up, and that is also based on like you have the option of selecting like the radius, within which it needs to be found, or if you're looking for only veg restaurants, so that is also a parameter, because some people are very specific about what kind of restaurant they want to go to. So the first level of authentication happened based my user, and now this level of my personal request of what kind of food item, if there are customizations in terms of if I want some extra items and stuff, then you can, I think you can customize that based on your request, and then you can search the food item and place the order with the customization. And after that, the payment procedure happens. That is another layer.
Good answer, Kamlika. We see Anil, Bhupendra, and Sina Krishna. They have also raised their hand. So any additional points with respect to request, or what all of you can do is you can probably talk about response part.
Yeah, let me just try to unmute them.
Mm-hmm.
We have Anil. Let me
Yes.
allow him to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Anil, you can go ahead.
Anil, we can't hear you.
Anil, you can unmute.
Hello. Yeah. See, and I raised for some other question, not for this Swiggy exercise.
Okay.
Then that got answered by
So would you like to
Krishna.
talk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. Go. Not for that.
Would you
Yeah.
like to answer this, or shall I move on to
No.
somebody else?
Yeah. You can move to somebody else. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I think we have Sina Krishna Perumal. Let me give you the permission to talk.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
So here I'm talking about offers for you section. In this, the inputs are like the earlier orders, general preferences in that area, discounts from restaurants in that area. So all that becomes kind of the inputs or the request based on the user's PIN code, user's earlier orders, and the user's preferences. User might have preferred continental food and so on. The response could be the discounted food, their pictures, the food details, the time period for which the food discount is available, the distance or the time that might be taken for serving that food or delivering that food, right? So this could be the response. And obviously, the user authorization will also go in as part of the request.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Good answer. Good answer. Quickly, Bhupendra and Monica, any additional points from both of you?
Yeah, hi Sushant. This is Bhupendra.
Hey, Bhupendra.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so apart from this, I just wanted to add in the request, we can send all these data, which he has said that user ID, restaurant ID, menu item ID, which is specifically I have selected and chosen my location, because on basis on the my location, restaurants they can allow me like approve my request or they can deny. And of course, this session ID and transaction ID and my payment ID. Okay. And in the response, as an user, I'll get my time apart from all these data, time to be get ready that food, delivery person details, like his name and contact number, and in what time he is arriving to me, and time for delivery.
Right.
I think that's all are the going to be extra things.
Mm-hmm. Yes. No, great answer, Bhupendra. Monica? Hey, Monica, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So apart from like
most
most of the points are covered. So after authentication and authorization, user will send the search request using like based on the selected food, location, and the profile ID. And in response, we will be getting the restaurant ID, the food items, and other food items which are available with that restaurant, delivery time, all those details you will get as a response. And after that, like from those response, like user will make a selection and place the order, and the food item he selected, that all details will go in the request. And once the order is booked, right, for him, then again in the response we will be getting, okay, who will be delivering it, what time it will be delivered. So these will be sending like as a response of that.
Yes, no. Perfect answer, Monica. In the interest of time, maybe we can just take one last comment, probably from Ruchi.
Sure.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, all. So actually, I wanted to add on the response where Monica has already added, but looking at the goal structure where we say the goal is to actually deliver the food to the user, if we map to the parameters we were looking, players, we had already discussed that it will be user, delivery boy, and the restaurant. In modules, we will only be having firewall and the applications which will be accepting different APIs. And in interactions, first level is authentication because it asks us to log in. Second level, it goes as what is the service we want, whether we want food delivery, we want grocery delivery, where if we look at today's structure. So after selecting the food, there are different filtration and parameters which will work as parameters to the API where we want to get the list of restaurant. It can go by the rating of restaurant, the cuisine, if I'm selecting anything, veg, non-veg food, the pin code, because within a particular radius it should be. And even if I give a food item, then all the restaurants which are serving that food item, that is also becomes a parameter. And once user selects the food from where they want to deliver, that's another request call which user makes, and wait for the restaurant to accept the order. So restaurant accepting the order is also a response request, and the other response which we get is once the restaurant has accepted the order, so the person who is allocated for the delivery, what will be the time taken for the delivery, and online tracking where we can track the user where he has reached. The last response is actually a asynchronous response because we can go and check at any time where our order is, but it's not always that we are always waiting for the tracking time and the delivery boy where they have reached. But before that, wherever we are placing the order, all those will be going as a synchronous request because we need a response at each time to take the next.
Great answer. And so glad to see that all of you are using some of these terms that we just covered, asynchronous, synchronous. You are also thinking about, for example, Ruchi just mentioned, and Monica and others, all of you mentioned about even response. So when you are talking about response, let's say restaurants, you're talking about a lot of things which should be part of your response. Name of the restaurant, their rating, so on and so forth. So now suddenly if you draft your response, you see that there are a lot of fields, elements, and attributes that you have to include in your response. So that is basically the next step. I see Nirmal has raised his hand. We don't have much time, but Nirmal, very quickly, if you want to share your thought or any feedback, feel free to do so.
1 second.
Sure.
Nirmal, I don't see that you have raised your hand. I think, did you lower your hand? Should I? Okay, let me just give you the permission to talk.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, Nirmal.
Hello. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Nirmal, you're audible. Yes.
Yeah. Since Sushant was talking about responses, I actually don't know if spice level was one of the parameters which came up in our discussions. I just got to log out for a minute or so, incidentally. But I just don't know if spice level also was one of the parameters. Did anyone mention?
Yeah, no, I have very good point. In fact, I think one of them mentioned vegetarian versus non-vegetarian, but yes, I think, see, these are all different options that you can provide to your customers where they can customize and personalize. And ultimately, this is what you need to pass so that you are not really going to get the response which is, let's say, has high spice level restaurants, which your customers don't even want. So yes, these are different parameters. Good thought process. So I see how all of you are now thinking from customer's point of view, that how you should provide them all available options. And then based on the request, you can tweak your response by using those attributes to filter it, or maybe better sort it. So great answer, Nirbal. Now, since we don't have much time, we just have 4 minutes.
Wanted to say is about the notification that could be asynchronous. So based on my preferences or my past orders, there could be notifications on the discounts or the earlier orders, or if something is kind of being ordered in the nearby areas very often, that could be coming as a suggestion or a recommendation, or some great discount provided by Swiggy itself on delivery charges and all. That could be a notification as well. So there could be different notifications coming as asynchronous messages.
Yes, nice. So all these push notifications that you just said, yes, these are all asynchronous. Before we end and conclude today's session, I want to quickly take maybe 1 minute to answer something which Radha Jaya Lakshmi has asked. So Fatima, do we have maybe 1 more minute to answer this question?
Yes, you can take 1 more minute. I would, I would then conclude it. Yeah, after.
Because this question is very relevant, and that's why I thought we should cover it. That what level of technical skills are needed if I have to design APIs? Okay, Krishna mentioned about a couple of tools that you should use, right? But you can even use a simple notepad to design your APIs. So when we are talking about designing APIs, it's all about understanding what your customers will require to be passed and what they would like to see. So in that sense, you don't really need a lot of technical understanding of how things work behind the scene. As business analyst, product manager, or whatever your role is, you are responsible for defining what you think will have to be or should have to be part of your request and response. You don't really need to be very technical to understand your customer's need. Okay, so that's the answer. You don't really need a lot of technical skills. If you have, great. If you can use Postman, obviously it's going to help you to kind of see how this API is going to work, whether it's giving you all the required results. So understanding Postman or some of the basic tools, yes, but you don't really need to be very technical. You can design API based on your requirements, based on discussions with customers, and then you can just use simple notepad as well to come up with list of elements, attributes, different parameters, and that should be done. Okay, so with that thought, next 15 seconds, if you see this slide, the intention, and even Mentor Swami mentioned it in the beginning, that it doesn't matter in which role, how many years of experience you have. If you know Michelangelo, very famous sculptor, philosopher, at age 87, when somebody asked him about why and how he's doing that great work, he just said, no, I'm still learning. So which shows there is no end to learning. If you want to upskill yourself, start it now, spend time. Even if you know about APIs, great, but you should now think about what's next. So continue upskilling yourself. There is no end to learning, as Michelangelo said. So this is what the idea is. After this session also, today, tomorrow, whenever you get time, just go through the basics which we covered, work on a couple of case studies, pick whatever comes to your mind and try to build API from end-to-end workflow point of view, kind of that sequence diagram that Krishna showed. So with that thought, I'll hand it over to Fatima for the further proceedings.
Yes. So thank you so much, Sushant and Krishna. It was such an amazing session, and in 1 hour time, there was a lot of information that you covered, and it was very comprehensive, simple, and easy to understand. So till today, I was thinking that rest stands for relaxation, but looks like there's a lot more to do, more than relaxation. So there was a lot of food for thought for all the business analysts who attended today's session, and there's a lot of things that they can go back and work upon. So thank you so much to both of you. And now I would again call our mentor to give a vote of thanks to both of you.
Thank you so much, Sushant and Krishna. And I think that, I mean, the commitment from our side is that we will graduate this into a physical face-to-face workshop, because this small time will never do for the amount, the quality of content you are getting in. And from our side, I mean, definitely we co-create and co-host a kind of a face-to-face workshop where IIBA Bangalore chapter is trying for you to build that workshop so that they get the hands-on experience. And I also take this opportunity as a token of gratitude from IIBA Bangalore chapter, a simple that memento, and this will reach you in a couple of days to your home. Already, I think that we will build that continuously build wherever there is a possibility. Please come to Fatima or Vikas, that will continue to give a session like this, excellent quality session. Thank you for your the way you have set the context itself, very interesting. I don't understand much about API, but a layman like me can understand your concepts. It's nothing like that. Great, thank you so much. And I also take Krishna Kumar, your real life example was very exciting. Thank you so much for that. And always, IIBA believes that, every exam we have more about case study situation, because we always encourage relate and learn kind of a concept, and you demonstrated that. Thank you for being here, and this memento as token of our gratitude will reach your home. And I request both of you, take it from your family member and share the photograph it, so that the whole, because that's a right way of, because we could not give physically, even today, whenever even physical this thing, I used to invite my wife and ask her to hand over the memento. That's a way, because that's the only way we enjoy. And at the end of the day, we do everything for the family. I request you to share this. And we shout at our Instagram, we shout at the top of the voice that you are the great volunteer for IIBA. And also not only, together with your family, you are doing it. Like that I will do. Thank you so much. And a great thanks to Vikas and Fatima. Sincerely, I did not even know what both of them are doing, and they demonstrated their leadership and mentoring skill. Thank you, Vikas, and the whole board of, without their background support, all the board member of IBA Bangalore chapter, you made it happen. But not last least, participation, extraordinary participation by each individual. That is something great. And please continue to have this kind of quality session. We are going to continue every every week and every month and every quarter and every biannual and annual. This is the way, thank you so much. And both Krishna Kumar and Sushant, you raise the bar of our excellence by challenging, by giving a practical session. So let us see the next session comes to your bar of excellence. We try our level best. We strive for that. Thank you so much. Over to you, Fatima.
Thank you so much once again. I would also like to thank all the IIBA chapters for doing an awesome job in delivering quality content and value-based webinars for the benefit of the community. And special thanks to Vikas, Swami sir, and all the team, the entire team in the IIBA Bangalore chapter for making this webinar successful. And I would also like to thank the audience who have taken time out of their busy schedule, and it's a Saturday, and all of us appreciate that you have joined the session. Actually, it really shows your commitment and willingness to learn, expand your knowledge, and open new avenues in your career. So thank you once again to Sushantji and Krishna for such a wonderful session. Thanks a lot. So we will be having exciting webinars coming up, and we will be posting the details in the Instagram portal and the WhatsApp groups very soon on the upcoming webinar. So stay tuned and do become part of our Instagram and follow us on Insta and LinkedIn as well. All our latest updates will be posted there. With that, we conclude today's session. We are on time. Thank you so much to all of you once again. Thanks a lot.